Are you a fan of swiftness and subtlety? Do you like to take down enemies from afar? Perhaps you would like to shower your enemies with deadly crits and make them regret existing. Acrobats are the marksmen of Flyff, and if that sounds like your kind of thing, then you come to the right place. Hey, what is up guys, it's Emenalus, and welcome back to another video. Acrobats are a job that have always held a special place in my heart, and I would always dream of having a super powerful jester or something along the lines back in the old days, but I never really got that far with them since I'm really into melee type characters in general. That doesn't mean that the job itself is by any means awful, and especially with the improvements made for them in Flyff universe, they certainly earned their position in the roster. I don't own a ranger for nothing after all. Both Acrobat and Magician have been on heavy request from you, but since the demand seems to gravitate a little bit more towards Acrobats, I'll be covering them as a topic of today's guide. Worry not though, Magician enthusiasts, for your job will be the spotlight soon enough. Thank you for all the comments from you though, knowing there's an audience anticipating a video makes it all worthwhile making. As always, I won't be going through any strict stat builds or anything like that in the guide, as there's a lot of factors to account for when it comes to your character's needs, from gearing to personal preference. What works for someone might not work as well for somebody else, and the matter of character building is highly subjective. Instead, I will be taking my time to explain what each stat does for each playstyle there is, and leave the creative expression in your hands. That way you'll have a better understanding of what you're making and have fun doing it, rather than pushing yourself into a corner with a specific build. But with all of that out of the way, let's put on our giraffe hats and get right into it. Acrobats take advantage of distance, and their arsenal consists of bows and yo-yos. Bows are long-range weaponry that allow you to establish and maintain a distance to your enemy, making it possible to minimize conflict or even get out of combat unscathed. They make use of arrows that you have to buy and stock up on regularly, unless you want to end up in a fistfight with a giraffe. And trust me on this, you don't. Yo-yos don't have as much reach as bows do, but they can occasionally push an enemy back to keep them at bay. While this might not be as reliable in terms of avoiding damage, at least you don't have to move to keep your distance, but rather do that as you're fighting. Acrobats may not be as durable as mercenaries and assists are, but that's because they don't need to. With their skill set, stats, and ability to attack from afar, they're much less vulnerable than the melee classes are, but still no match to a crazy giraffe. With the amount of damage they can deal later on, they're not all that far from being considered human artillery. They can be a little bit slow to start at first, as they don't build their much needed crit chance properly early on, but as soon as they reach their second jobs, they take a complete turn in terms of firepower. Acrobats can advance to either become Rangers or Jesters who specialize in bows and yo-yos respectively, unlocking their chosen weapon's full potential and greatly increasing their combat potential, allowing them to truly become a force to be reckoned with. If you wish to learn more about these advanced jobs, I will be introducing them towards the end of the video, so do stick around if you're interested. Acrobats aren't particularly hard to build stat-wise, but how you should build your acrobat will heavily depend on what weapon type you'll be using. Even though they are fully capable of using both weapon types freely, building stats for one makes them significantly weaker at using another, so it's important to choose your path as an acrobat early on, so you won't be wasting points on a stat you won't be really using. Strength increases your damage when using yo-yos but not bows, so depending on what weapon type you're going for, this stat will either be important or irrelevant to you. Stamina is a defensive stat that increases your HP, FP, and defense values. FP is also the resource used for yo-yo skills and acrobats utility skills, making it potentially useful for yo-yo acrobats. Dexterity is a versatile stat that not only increases your crit chance, hit rate, and attack speed, but also increases the damage that you deal with bows. It is an incredibly important stat for bow users, and even yo-yo users will need some of it in balance with their strength stat to land their basic attacks. Intellect is a utility stat that bow users might be interested in for extra MP, but aside from that, they won't see any use in acrobats. Some bow skills scale on intellect too, but not as well as on dexterity, making it really worth it only if you're not comfortable frequently replenishing your MP. So, before you start assigning stat points, ask yourself, Which weapons would you like to focus on? Knowing which one you'll go for and where you have to put your points in will secure you a strong start, even if you're not certain which weapon you'd enjoy more in the long run. You have a chance to rearrange your stats at level 60 if you end up having a change of heart. Just make sure to choose the right advanced job if you plan on switching up. Acrobat's skill tree consists of a wide variety of different combat skills, along with some utility skills at the top. Because of the vastly different weapon types that Acrobats have, the combat skills are split into two different paths, one exclusively for yo-yos and one for bows. Regardless of which path you're taking though, there's plenty of notable skills that you might be interested in. The utility spells are all useful but mostly situational, so how many points you want to put on them is entirely up to you. Fast Walker gives you a burst of movement speed for a short amount of time, useful for quicker travel or maintaining distance. Dark Illusion makes you invisible temporarily, allowing you to avoid or escape monsters. Perfect Block is a buff that increases your block rate, making survival a little easier. Pulling is a skill that pulls an enemy towards you, but is only usable with yo-yos. Both combat skill trees for Acrobats contain a mastery buff that increases the specified weapon's damage and should definitely be maxed out as soon as possible. For bow users, there's also a skill called Arrow Rain that you can learn at level 50, allowing you to do group damage, although much later than assists and mercenaries can. There's a lot of other combat skills that enable crowd control, taking advantage of Dark Illusion and much more, but do keep in mind that most skills in Flyff aren't all that effective for purely dealing damage. So do look into what else all the abilities can do and see if there's something that catches your interest. But before you make your decision, let's move on to talk about the actual playstyles. If you were thinking about going for bows as an acrobat, there's a couple ways you could go about it, as bow users have the capability to become effective in both 1v1 and AoE. For starters though, let's talk about the 1v1 approach. 1v1 refers to a playstyle where you take enemies down one by one. As simple as that might seem on the surface, there's a lot of mechanics in Flyff that have to be taken into consideration if you want a 1v1 character to work both reliably and effectively. That's what I usually would be putting a lot of emphasis on if you weren't thinking of making a bow acrobat. In fact, being a bow acrobat is simpler than being a giraffe is. Can you imagine that? If you can't, then do you want a stat build? Well, here you go. First, you add dex. And then, you add some more dex. What's next? Even more dex. Dex, 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 and dex. Here's some dextions as well. No, really, that's it. If you've checked any of my other job guides so far, you would know that I always emphasize the importance of balancing our strength and dexterity when making a 1v1 character because of the other stats like hit rate and attack speed that dexterity gives, which are equally as important as damage. So when you combine these necessary stats on top of the fact that dexterity also increases your damage, what do you get? Quite literally, the perfect stat. It's got everything you'll ever need, and you won't even have to bat an eye about stat balancing, ever. Look at how jealous he is. But well, that isn't to say that bow acrobats are objectively the strongest job, because they get to put all their points into damage. While you do get everything in a neat all-in-one package, bows don't actually scale as much as damage as most other weapons do. One could call it an inevitable trade-off for convenience. Bow acrobats tend to be quite weak compared to their peers, assuming they've got all the other stats covered as well, but even that is only until level 60. After proper crit scaling on the second job comes to play, their advanced job, Ranger, spikes up in terms of firepower. Either way, if you want to make a strong bow acrobat, building dexterity as much as you can is the way to go, and don't forget to learn bow mastery when you can. You can consider adding some more stamina for durability, or intellect for extra MP for your skills, but I would honestly recommend changing your rings or other equipment rather than ruining your stats over it. Accessories are quite handy for making flexible stats, and you should take advantage of them if you don't need a particularly huge amount of a certain stat. Talking about stamina and intellect though, I think it's time I brought up the option of using AoE to fight your enemies. AoE is the approach where you use skills that deal group damage to take down a pack of enemies simultaneously. As I mentioned earlier, the first skill that allows you to deal group damage, Arrow Rain, becomes available starting from as late as level 50, meaning that you've got quite a long way to go before you can actually move on to so-called mobbing. On the bright side though, you won't have to go out of your way to build yourself differently specifically for AoE, because unlike with the melee classes, you preferably won't be tanking any hits. Unless you're a giraffe, of course. They love pain. Bow acrobats are fundamentally different from melees in the way that they can use the hit and run tactic, or H&R for short, to take down their enemies. In other words, they can avoid making contact with the enemies entirely while using their skills, eliminating the need to build themselves to be tanky. You can build yourself to be full dexterity, for example, and be equally as viable for both 1v1 and AoE, provided you have the right gear to make the most out of either approach. You can check out what gear comes up through Flyffipedia.com's item search, which should be really handy for finding what you're looking for. This concern is more driven towards Rangers though, as there aren't any particular AoE sets for Acrobats. If you wish to be on the safer side though, you can wear defensive accessories for more room for error, but once you get the hang of it, I doubt you'll find even that really necessary. One downside to H&R AoE with an Acrobat is that arrow rain is a damage over time effect tied to the location it's cast on, so unless the targets are stationary or the player takes extra risk with maneuvering, it isn't really all that effective. It might be a better idea to stick with 1v1 until you reach level 60 and learn some new AoE spells as a ranger, unless you've got someone tanking for you, or you have a lot of control and patience. But either way, the option is there, and even though it might be a little underwhelming at first, it's only the beginning. Another alternative to playing Acrobats is grabbing the fidget spinners that are gathering dust in your drawer and throwing them at your enemies, because you got nothing better to do with them. Playing with Yo-Yos is a more complex way to play Acrobats than bows and has more limited range, but it's definitely a viable choice when built properly. Unlike bows, Yo-Yos are subject to pretty much the same rules that the rest of the melee classes are. Yo-Yos scale damage to strength and not dexterity, meaning that striking a good balance between damage and functionality is important. Even if you were capable of dealing a lot of damage, that amounts to nothing if the cartwheels you're throwing aren't even landing your mark. Personally, the golden ratio that I always go for is having at least 40% hit rate and 70% attack speed and going up from there, but that varies from person to person and you might be satisfied with more or less. You can take those values as reference though, and reaching there should at the very least give you a firm feeling of consistency. Dexterity can help you with getting both hit rate and attack speed, but it isn't all that good with scaling hit rate. A more reliable way of building hit rate early on is through equipment sets and weapons that might provide you with some, and assists that might be able to buff you with accuracy, a buff that directly increases your hit rate. As you become stronger and can afford to invest a little on upgrading, the upgrade bonus effect on armor can also give you a bonus hit rate, making it much easier to manage. All of this information can also be found on the wiki website called Flyffipedia.com, where you can go and discover what options become available to you as you grow stronger, along with handy information on quests, drop rates, dungeons, and more. I recommend checking it out when you've got the time. I'm sure you won't regret it. I'll leave a link in the description if you're interested. One thing that I should point out is that Yo-Yo Acrobats tend to be the weakest starting off because their weapons have the lowest base damage compared to other classes, so don't be shocked if you don't amount to as much as others might. You're probably not doing anything wrong, assuming you've followed everything else in the guide so far. Learning the Yo-Yo Master skill as soon as possible can help with the low damage output, but other than that, you're on your own. If you're patient enough to go through a slow start though, your gameplay will take a complete turn once you become a Jester, and here's why. Jester is the advanced job path for acrobats that want to specialize in using yo-yos. While they lack the ability to deal group damage, they make up for it with their savage crits and specialty in trickery, possessing an extraordinary toolkit for crowd control and PvP. Unlike any other job, Jesters are capable of getting a whopping 4% extra critical chance instead of 1 for every 10 points of dexterity, making building critical chance with them the easiest in the whole game. Jesters use this to their advantage to make up for the low base damage of yo-yos, and take that far and beyond with their incredible critical damage scaling that their equipment provides. Building crit isn't entirely reliant on dexterity either, as their skills and gear add up to their total. As Jesters use strength to scale their damage, it's ideal to put as many points of strength as possible and getting the rest of your dex and other stats from elsewhere so you won't have to consider restatting anytime soon. Jesters can be a little tough to balance out at first, but they tend to become more manageable as time goes on. Jesters as of right now are one of the strongest 1v1 jobs in Flyff universe later on, but make sure to confirm this if you're watching this video at a much later date. You can use the Flyff universe Discord server to do some fact checking if you're not sure. I'll leave a link there in the description as well. As for PvP, do mind that it is a highly pay to win activity on Flyff universe, and I do not guarantee how relevant they actually are as I don't participate in there. And in case there are some of you old school players who might be wondering if Bow Jesters are still a viable choice, the answer to that question is no. Jester's bow scaling was fixed in Flyff universe, and especially later on, Rangers tend to heavily overpower them on 1v1 with their ability to deal group damage adding a cherry on top. So if you're thinking of going for bows, I recommend just going for Ranger instead. Ranger is the alternative path for those who wish to make the most out of their bows. With their ability to fight enemies from afar, great capability for AoE, and strong damage in 1v1, they are a versatile job suitable for any sort of purpose in combat, making them a reliable choice to go for. Thanks to Flame and Ice Arrow that they can learn immediately upon job advancement, their capability for range AoE combat becomes much better than with just Arrow Rain and makes the AoE approach a viable choice for any ranger that wants to specialize in that. On top of that, Ranger's AoE skills are elemental in nature, which means that taking advantage of elements can help them deal even more damage, which isn't possible with most skills. Be sure to check out my guide to elements if becoming an AoE ranger interests you to make the most out of them. While Rangers don't scale as much crit as Jesters do, they still do get 2% critical chance for every 10 points of dexterity, which is twice as much as normal. And considering how bows scale on dexterity anyway, they are capable of building an incredible amount of crit rate as time goes on, and with the right equipment and skills they can become quite devastating in 1v1 as well. So whichever playstyle interests you more, Rangers got you covered on both ends. In conclusion, Acrobat is a job that one could refer to as a late bloomer. While they might be a little underwhelming when first starting off, their potential cranks up dramatically once they reach maturity. Whichever path you might choose if you do end up making an Acrobat, you won't end up disappointed. But as far as basic information regarding Acrobats goes, that's all for now. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, do consider leaving a like and commenting how you feel, and maybe even subscribing if you would like to see more content like this. If you feel like someone else you know might have a need for this guide, don't hesitate to share, as that's what this video is for, helping out those in need. If you have any more questions about Acrobats or just about anything else about the game, feel free to leave a comment, as I'm answering them regularly. Alternatively, you're free to join my Discord server, where it will be easier to hold actual conversations and you can catch my attention by simply pinging me. Pinging me while I'm sleeping will only guarantee bedroom monsters in your closet though, so do make sure you're not sending yours at 4 AM. Feel free to check out my Twitter as well if you want to be on top of what I'm up to and what I'm doing, whether it's Flyff, other games, or simply real life. I'm also starting streaming soon, unless I've started already by the time this video comes out, so be sure to check out my Twitch and leaving a follow if you want to be notified when I'll be live. Expect some Flyff streams, both generic and extraordinary ones, along with some other games I stream that you might be interested in. Feel free to drop a follow so you know when I'm live if you're interested. Lastly, a quick reminder that if you want to be part of the official Flyff Universe Discord or check out the wiki website for all of your flyffing needs, I'll be leaving the links for those down in the description as well. Thank you again so much for watching the video and investing your precious time to it, and I hope to see you on the next one that I'll be making, whether it'll be the 4th and last job guide for magicians or some other content that I'm brewing in the background. But until then, it's bye bye.